Good evening, everybody. Our top stories tonight. Red storm rising. Both Russia and China continuing their dangerous encroachment in the Western Hemisphere, still going unnoticed by the national left-wing media, D.C. lawmakers, even the president's national security apparatus. Instead of trying to thwart the rising threat of those nations, the State Department meeting with the Taliban, trying to broker a deal in Afghanistan, negotiating with terrorists in what is likely to be a futile effort to end what has been, to this point, a never-ending war. Why are our leaders tossing the Monroe Doctrine and failing to secure this hemisphere? Tonight, we take that up with Fox News senior strategic analyst General Jack King. Also, fired, disgraced former FBI Director James Comey, acting like he's starring in a movie back on Capitol Hill. Once again, frustrating House Republicans, refusing to answer their questions on what he knew about Russian collusion from its very origins. Comey using his appearance, of course, to grandstand, to transfer responsibility for sullying the reputation of the FBI.
The FBI's reputation has taken a big hit because the President of the United States, with his acolytes, has lied about it constantly. And in the face of those lies, a whole lot of good people who watch your network believe that nonsense. That's a tragedy.
We take up the tragedy that is James Comey and his return testimony. The latest for you on the corrupt deep state's ongoing efforts to subvert this president and his administration. An all-star lineup here for you tonight. Former Department of Justice Attorney Hans von Spakovsky and former FBI Assistant Director James Kallstrom. Former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell, all with us on tonight's broadcast. President Trump refusing to budge on his threats to shut down the government over congressional failure to fund the border wall. Congressman Jim Jordan today saying it's time for Republican leaders to stand with the president.
We got to get $5 billion for the wall. This was a central theme, central promise we made the voters in 2016. Everyone knows, just good common sense, we should be able to secure our southern border. We need to stand firm and get that done. And I do think, contrary to what Pelosi has said, I do think there are the votes in the House to get that done. I just hope our leadership puts that bill on the floor, the full $5 billion for the wall. The president was clear, very clear about that last week in the Oval Office. Let's stand with the president and get this done.
We take up the president's efforts to follow through on his campaign promise to build that wall to protect the American people. Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, with us. Also tonight, another volatile session on Wall Street. The Dow down more than 500 points on the day. We take up the latest in the market struggles here tonight. Our top story, the intrusion by Russia and China into the Western Hemisphere, and it's being roundly ignored by the left-wing media, Congress, the president's national security team, at least publicly. Russia has taken the bold step announcing it plans to establish its first ever military base in the Caribbean Sea just off the coast of Venezuela, only 1,350 miles from the Florida Keys. At this installation, Russia planning to keep nuclear-capable bombers, the same bombers that overflew the Caribbean last week with a Venezuelan Air Force. As Russia plans for a base in this hemisphere, China's 2021 agreed takeover of Israel's largest port, Haifa, may squeeze the United States Navy out of the port, which routinely hosts U.S. naval ships and drills. According to the Jerusalem Post, U.S. defense officials privately concerned that, quote, sensitive infrastructure matters haven't been properly vetted by Israel's full national security cabinet prior to approval. And let's not overlook the united efforts of both China and Russia when it comes to our national security. According to new reports, those two countries are working together on experiments to modify the atmosphere, which could turn weather into weapons, creating natural disasters such as hurricanes and earthquakes. That's the goal. The frequencies generated by these weapons would also affect human brain function. And what may be most concerning to the Government Accountability Office, the United States tonight is unable to defend against Russia and Chinese hypersonic weapons. The report finding, quote, China and Russia pursuing hypersonic weapons because of their speed, altitude, and maneuverability, which may defeat most missile defense systems, and they may be used to improve long-range, conventional, and nuclear strike capabilities. And these are the chilling words. There are no existing countermeasures in the U.S. arsenal. Joining us tonight, retired four-star General, Fox Business Chief Strategic Analyst, General Jack Keane. General, great to have you with us. That is quite a litany of threats posed just in this hemisphere. Your thoughts and your concerns about the absolute failure of the past two administrations to respond to the intrusion of both Russia and China, particularly in Central and South America.
Yeah, well, Lou, you know, I spent a year on the commission looking at the national defense strategy, and we just issued our report a few weeks ago, and clearly this administration has correctly identified Russia and China as part of a big power competition that the United States is engaged in. But the reality is their military capacities have closed on ours, and in certain areas, and you've identified one of them, there's some others as well, they exceed our capabilities.
Right.
And when you look at what they're doing in terms of their geopolitical strategy, dominate their own region, expand globally in terms of their own national interests. They're seeking other countries to be dependent on them, and they're also seeking domination. They are clearly clashing with U.S. national interests in our own hemisphere, in the Pacific, and in Europe, and actually also in the Middle East. There is not a major area where we're not clashing with Russia and China, at least one of them, in some cases, two of those countries.
And the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, announcing the Africa Initiative, Africa Prosper, last week. But at the same time, no public, at least strategy announced of any kind to defend the U.S. interest in this hemisphere and to preserve our region of influence. Seems like a fundamental proposition for any national security foreign policy.
No, I agree with you. We did not have a strategy to deal with Africa under the previous administration, and this administration has finally put one together.
Right.
And we got to give Bolton and the National Security Team credit for doing it, and I think the strategy is right on the mark. It's not about more troops in Africa. It's about using our economic engine to influence it and to break the chain of dependency that China and Russia is imposing on those nations. We need to do the same thing now, Lou, with our own hemisphere.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think the national security teams have been down there visiting. But we've got to fashion a Western Hemisphere strategy to confront Russia and China's influence.
This is such a natural for the president, who identified the weakness in sustaining R&D and building new weapons, building out our Navy, and replacing the remarkable aged Air Force fleet of war jets. But at the same time, this is a perfect region for the president to exert his leadership and his influence with his energy and his capacity to bring his vision to all of North and Central and South America.
Yeah, and it's got to be a comprehensive strategy. I mean, these countries, some of them are not as strong as they were a number of years ago. They're economically challenged. Some are moving towards socialism. We're very much very much aware of. And when we've got Iranians, Hezbollah, also in Central and South America. I mean, these nations have seen this as fertile ground to advance their national interests. And just a footnote about military technology here. What the Chinese and the Russians have developed with these hypersonic weapons is that, and you're right, there's no defense of it according to the GAO, and the Defense Department has said as much themselves. And of course, my commission that I was a part of, we certainly affirmed the same thing. These weapons could take out our carrier battle groups before they would ever be able to launch a single cruise missile or a single aircraft. They can reach all of our air bases in the Pacific, where we currently have our fighters, and take them down before we'd ever launched an aircraft. They could reach all of our air bases that we currently have in Europe and do the same and stop a carrier battle group from coming into the Baltic Sea. This is a significant military advance that they've made. Now, we are fast moving to do something about it, and certainly the Trump buildup is going to be very critical to achieving it.
And two contracts, and it's substantial. About $1 billion have already been put out on contract for R&D and development of these hypersonic weapons. And to explain the expression hypersonic, it is 5 times the speed of sound or higher, which is an extraordinary, obviously extraordinary speed.
10 times.
So
10 times the speed of sound.
And
remarkable technology.
Yeah, well, and all the more remarkable if we can get caught up. And certainly, as you lay it out, there's no choice here but to get caught up and caught up quickly, as the president fully intends. General Jack Keane, as always, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, good talking to you, Lou. Thank you.
Stocks sinking again today on concerns the Federal Reserve might again raise interest rates. We're going to find out pretty soon. Part of the reason the Dow fell 508 points today is because the Fed begins its 2-day meeting tomorrow, at which it will determine whether or not to raise rates, as has been planned for some time, by Wednesday. The markets are voting no right now, in case anybody wondered. The S&P 500 down 54 points, the NASDAQ down 157. All 3 major indexes in negative territory for the year. The Dow Jones Industrials plunging more than 3,000 points since October 3rd, when Fed Chairman Jerome Powell vowed to raise rates without evidence of inflation or excess demand in the economy. Perhaps this will teach the chairman a lesson. We'll be taking up these markets later in the show. Moody's chief economist, John Lunsky, among our guests. Also coming up, Paul Ryan, just a few days from leaving his post and perhaps leaving Washington, where he has always found time to try to aggrandize himself while he undercuts President Trump.
I think the Fed is, by the way, on the right track, normalizing.
I think he's trolling people, honestly. You've talked about inclusive politics, which tries to unify. Does President Trump practice those kind of politics?
Sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't. Do I support impeachment of Rod Rosenstein? No, I do not.
Well, you obviously cannot do that. You cannot end birthright citizenship with an executive order.
We don't want to have a shutdown. I have no interest in doing that. Bob Mueller has been left alone. I think he's going to continue to be left alone. But we still ran on this better way agenda. We put it into place. We put most of these things into law. As a result of our Better Way agenda getting into place, becoming law, people are better off now.
There are no words. There are no nice words to describe his ego, his incompetence, and his disloyalty. Did I mention his ego? Just wait until you hear what he's trying to take credit for now. But up next, lawmakers frustrated for a second day by fired FBI Director James Comey. We hope they're about through with him. It's about all anyone could stand. We'll have more right after the break. Former FBI Assistant Director James Kallstrom joins us. Stay with us. We're coming right back. Disgraced former FBI Director James Comey continued to try to deflect blame for his conduct and their consequences, blasting Republicans and President Trump testifying for nearly 6 hours before House lawmakers.
So another day of Hillary Clinton's emails and the Steele dossier. This while the President of the United States is lying about the FBI, attacking the FBI, and attacking the rule of law in this country. How does that make any sense at all? Republicans used to understand that the actions of a president matter, the words of a president matter, the rule of law matters, and the truth matters.
Well, joining us now, James Kallstrom, former assistant director of the FBI. He served nearly 30 years with the Bureau. Jim, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Lou.
It used to matter who ran the FBI. Your sense of what is going on in the FBI and its leadership still, and the performance of this disgraced former FBI director.
Yeah, Jim Comey is just, I don't know, I guess if, you looked at a picture of someone who was a narcissist, you'd have Jim Comey's, that would be the picture you'd have in the book. The guy's just out of his mind. The notion that the FBI reputation has been soiled, not because of him, but because of other things. I mean, it's because of him. And it's because of the other 5 or 6 or 10 or 12, whatever the number is, people around him. The McCabe's of the world, the Strzok's of the world, the Pages of the world, and all the rest of these people.
Everyone who was associated with him has been sullied and soiled and disgraced, whether they've been fired or whether they've been resigned.
Yeah, he's an educated nimwit. I mean, and he promoted people of his ilk around him, I guess, so he wouldn't feel he'd feel like he was still going to be the imperial wizard. The guy is just out of his mind, quite frankly. What he's done criminally, the federal violations he's put himself into, and the Bureau, he has zero support now in the FBI.
He carried out an investigation against the President of the United States for nearly a year before there was a special counsel. It's unclear to anyone right now how he got away with it, and why there was not some check, because as far as we know, no other FBI director in history has done that.
He got away with it because he was a lieutenant in Obama's intel army.
Yeah.
He was a lieutenant in the army with others, Brennan et al., Clapper et al. This whole conspiracy, first off to stop Trump,
right,
and then if he, by some miracle, was elected, to make his administration worthless.
I think back every time we talk about the intelligence apparatus of the Obama administration unleashed on this president. I can recall vividly when the president said that he was being wiretapped, and the national left-wing media mocked him, said, no, ridiculous, no evidence, blah, blah, blah. It turns out it was worse than wiretapped. It was persecution, it was surveillance, it was spies within his campaign organization. There was nothing that they didn't resort to try to destroy this man as a candidate and then as a president.
And you look at these timelines, meetings at the White House with Obama and just a few other people. He goes to New York to brief the president on certain things. He stays behind, and he mischaracters, the actual Steele document. Then he lets CNN, of course, ahead of time, know that he was going to do that.
Right.
Then he signals, okay, it's okay, CNN, you got the hook. You can do your show. I mean, the whole thing is just...
it's disgraceful.
It's totally disgraceful.
And what he did to General Michael Flynn is just disgusting. Tomorrow there will be a sentencing. And for what? Sentencing him for what?
What they did to General Flynn is just an absolute, total outrage. The American people should be outraged. What they did with him, they bankrupted him. They made him sell his house. They made him do all kinds of things over nothing, over some grudges.
And then they announced today that they're going after his two business partners as foreign lobbyists.
Well, I hope Judge Sullivan throws the case out. I hope he chastises everybody involved in this witch hunt. I mean, they were out of control what they did to him. They were in violation of the Constitution. They were in violation of the privacy regulations. The unmaskings, we haven't even talked about that.
And that, I know in your view, that's a bigger scandal than any of all of
hundreds and hundreds of unmaskings that have not, the evidence of which
by the Obama administration
have not seen the light of day yet.
Right.
Who knows what the number is? Maybe it's 1,000. But it was all part of this scheme that was hatched in the White House with the national security team and guys like Comey.
Well, I'm sure that if we look to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other cable networks, we'll see a story about it tomorrow. I'm just kidding. We will not, nor have we to this point.
Yeah.
Jim, great to have you with us.
Nice to be with you, Lou.
James Kallstrom.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, partner. Good to see you. Be sure to vote on our poll tonight. Do you think Russia's new military base off the coast of Venezuela is a direct result of the Obama administration's abandonment of the Monroe Doctrine? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs tonight. Up next, President Trump proven right on interest rates, putting more pressure on the Fed ahead of their final meeting of the year. Will they have the guts to do the right thing? Will they have the principle? Or will they repair to that phony nonsense of independence? How about good judgment and intelligence? We'll take it up right after the break. Moody's Managing Director John Lunsky joins us. Oh, we've got to talk about something that none of us want to discuss, and that is a market that's selling off hugely. The Dow today down more than 1,000 points over the last 2 trading days, only 508 points lower today. The S&P, the Nasdaq at 52-week lows. The S&P down 54, the Nasdaq down 157, and volume picking up to 4.6 billion shares on this beautiful Monday in America. Crude oil down nearly 4%, dropping below $50 a barrel for the first time since November. Gold and silver up 0.5%. Copper lost 0.5%. You want to figure out what's happening with commodities? This is the place for you tonight. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. Joining me now, John Lonsky. He's Chief Economist, Managing Director at Moody's, and it's great to have you with us.
Same here.
This is a heck of a time to have this discussion, but what we're watching in this market right now, you could almost make a case for deflation, certainly disinflation here, with all of the talk from the Fed about inflation. What in the heck is going on in that Fed?
The Fed still believes in the Phillips curve, but the Phillips curve hasn't been in effect, I think, since the 1970s. The Phillips curve, by the way, means that as the unemployment rate drops, inflation rises. That hasn't been happening. The opposite's been happening.
You have to raise rates.
Yeah, you got to raise rates.
According to the Phillips curve. Jerome Powell, I've said this on this broadcast before. Janet Yellen had learned her lesson as Fed chair. It's one of the reasons I think she would have been a superior choice to Jerome Powell, but now he's hopefully learned his. We're going to find out over the next 2 days, because in the Fed's open market committee meeting, they're going to decide the direction of rates. They're supposed to raise rates again because Jerome Powell pounding his chest saying he's the Fed chairman, it's independent, and the president was wrong about rates. The president was right, and he was right from the beginning.
That's incredible. Yeah, the president even did a better job forecasting rates than most Wall Street economists.
He knows more.
Yeah, he's a real estate guy.
He knows more.
Yeah.
He's a businessman who's built a fortune and preserved it.
That's correct. And what may indeed happen, this could be if we have a rate hike on Wednesday. I don't think it's certain anymore. If the market slumps,
better not be.
They may just hold off.
Is there any doubt in your mind that the Fed doesn't understand now empirically, looking at these markets, looking at these yields? You look at the 10-year, the 2-year, the 5-year, a flat curve, inverted actually today. To whatever degree that's a forecasting tool, it would be insane to raise rates.
And that's right. You know, the flat curve is telling the Fed, the market is telling the Fed that short-term rates are too high.
Right.
So it's about time to go ahead and halt rate hikes for the time being. You know, it wasn't that long ago the Fed was talking about a Fed funds rate above 3% by the end of 2019. Now the market is telling the Fed, no way, Fed funds may be no higher than 2.4% a year from now.
You know, just for fun, I went back today and I looked at some of the business reporting on some of the august publications in the country on October 3rd, after Jerome Powell had assured everyone he was going to raise rates for a while. They're nothing but plaudits, even though the target hadn't been reached and there was no indication of inflation anywhere, and it was exactly as it was the first interest rate hike after Janet Yellen took over. I went back, and there was no suggestion that perhaps this was premature. Perhaps he should wait for the markets. Perhaps he should look for economic evidence for the necessity. Meanwhile, we've lost trillions of dollars in this market because a few fools at the Fed didn't listen to the president.
Since the latest rate hike of September 26, the market value of common stock is down by $4 trillion.
Unbelievable.
That's a lot of money, and that's doing a lot of damage to some retirement plans.
It is. And it's, you know, and I'm not really very appreciative of hearing a bunch of ignoramuses walking around saying, you know, we're normalizing the conditions in the economy, and they have no idea what they're talking about. Did you hear that? Paul Ryan,
I don't know what normalization means. I don't know what an equilibrium rate of interest means. Interest rates fluctuate. They move above.
On every point he wants to disagree with the president, he's wrong. Ryan is wrong. And that, you know, if they could get rid of every damn fool like him in Washington, this country could move ahead smartly under this president's leadership. Let's talk about how we're going to move forward here. A Fed that should be properly cautioned now, chastened, humbled by the idiocy of the decisions that they've taken, given the markets, given the economic reality. The American people need to have confidence that the Fed will do no further harm. They have taken, $4 trillion out. Enough already. Now get some back.
That's exactly right, and that very well might be the case. Don't be surprised. This might be a replay of 87, 98. We're in a strong economy because of a weak equity market. The Fed eventually cuts rates, and in response, equity prices recover.
And every voter out there is going to remember this, that this president had over $7 trillion in appreciation in the equities market. Those were the Trump markets. Since October 3rd, this is the Fed's market, and that's where the blame lies.
Yeah, the ball's in the Fed's court at this time, and in all likelihood, I think the Fed is going to handle matters properly, though it may take a while.
It may take a while, but I'm going to go with 1987 redux. Sharp losses.
September 1987, the Fed hikes rates. What happens on October 19th, 1987? You remember that?
I do very well.
Black Monday.
It was a Black Monday, but we've had Black Mondays, we've had Black Tuesdays, we've had Black everything. The good news is we were pretty well on the way to recovery by February of '88. Let's
took a while.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it was relatively quick. So there we are. With that, all that sunshine and Candy Rock Mountain viewpoints, I think that's a good place to stop.
That's right, and keep the unemployment rate moving lower, and don't worry about the Phillips curve. Don't get all upset about inflation, because some average Joe who gets a 3% increase for his hourly wage represents a threat to price stability. That's not the case.
Yeah, they don't want me near one of those damn fools talking that. If anyone ever begrudges working men and women with higher wages, I'll cry for help to deal with it. Anyway, John, good to have you there.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. John Lunsky, Moody's. Obstructionist, obfuscating, lame duck speaker Paul Ryan, spending his final days in Washington doing what he does best. Self-aggrandizement, taking credit for the president's achievements, instead of working with Congress to move ahead with the president's America First agenda. In one of his last moments of self-indulgence, Ryan releasing this trailer, that's right, a video about himself, about his efforts to pass tax reform.
Our tax system is punishing all those qualities that make America great.
It was political suicide.
It was good work. It's what needed to be done. It's just that most members were really uncomfortable about it.
Like anything else the speaker delves into, the planning doesn't go on for weeks or for months. It goes on for years.
We're offering a better way.
Oh my gosh. I don't want to hear those words again. We'll be back right after the break. Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. She's next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Funding for the government runs out Friday midnight, December 21st. The partial shutdown, according to some estimates, would lead to an estimated 400,000 federal employees working without pay and 350,000 furloughed. The agencies potentially affected include Homeland Security, Transportation, Commerce, Agriculture, Housing, and Urban Development. Joining us tonight, Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the President. And Kellyanne, great to have you with us. And a shutdown looming, various stories coming at us from all directions. How likely, in your judgment, is the prospect of a deal that would forestall any shutdown?
Well, with the ultimate deal maker in the Oval Office, Lou, I believe that there is a much better chance of getting a deal than not. But look, the president wants to keep the government open. He just doesn't want the borders to remain open the way they are. He wants there to be full funding for the government, but that funding must include adequate funding for border security. I don't know if he can be any more clear on this issue. And I don't know if we could see any more excerpts from Democrats in the past who voted for Secure Fences Act in 2006, including Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, and the whole lot of them.
You mentioned...
And then, of course, you've seen all the video clips of them supporting borders and security before. So they need to come up and vote.
We've got a video clip of Chuck Schumer I'd like to roll for the audience, if I may, on Meet the Press and responding to the president's demand for funding for the wall. Here he is.
President Trump should understand there are not the votes for the wall in the House or the Senate. He is not going to get the wall in any form. Even the House, which is a majority Republican, they don't have the votes for his $5 billion wall plan.
Your reaction, Counselor?
My reaction is very simple, that Chuck Schumer keeps saying wall, 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 thinking that he can make the wall a dirty word, all the while not realizing that this is about border security. It includes a wall, but it includes all the enhancements and improvements and fencing that Customs and Border Patrol tell us they need to be able to do their jobs and keep us all safe, Lou, and B, the same type of funding that the Senate passed in July. 10 of the 15 Democrats on the relevant committee voted for that package in July, and Chuck Schumer then and now, the minority leader in the Senate, made joyful noises about it. So he's being disingenuous when he's standing on semantics about wall, when this is about border security. It includes the wall, but it includes other things as well.
He apparently has such time available to him as minority leader that he can count votes in the House. I thought that was that was interesting. The Mueller witch hunt goes on. Leaks suggesting that the Mueller still wants the president to sit down with a special counsel for an interview. Rudy Giuliani, the president's lead attorney, making it clear, as he put it, that it would be over his dead body. Your thoughts?
Well, let's get Rudy Giuliani some vitamins and keep him alive then, and let's hope he was speaking in jest. But Rudy's right. I mean, this is somebody who came in as the president's personal attorney and said, I think I can meet with the Mueller team and see what else they need from us, maybe wrap this up, and just goes on and on and on. The other thing is, don't forget that the president has submitted answers to the Mueller questions. Those are submitted with his counsel. That's already been done. That's all done under oath. And I think that what happened today in these people giving Jim Comey a platform yet again so he can grandstand, he's a proven, renowned liar and leaker, sanctimoniously grandstanding, talking about the future and truth and the Constitution. Remember, he got
I've got to be honest, I want the president to fire him again. Can that be done? To fire
Once
him?
is never enough. Well, in that case, the sequel would be
not
as
when
good
it comes
as the
to
original.
Comey.
Yes.
So let's turn to...
Seriously speaking, he was talking about the Flynn investigation, and he came out and he did what he always does. He's got to just go talk to the press. I guess he's selling his next book, but people aren't buying it, literally.
And turning to, again, the wall itself. That wall is so fundamental. That's to remind everyone, to the president, his campaign, his promises, and he alone understanding the urgency among all of the presidential candidates to secure our borders, our ports, and to remind people that nearly all of the marijuana, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, and now fentanyl are coming across that border. 70,000 ODs, deaths a year. And people want to debate a wall and securing that. That's where the Dems are. That's where the rhinos like Paul Ryan are.
That's where those who are resisting are, and I would remind them that walls work. Where you see them in Arizona, where they've been built in California, they work. They do deter people from coming over, and poison from flooding our borders as well. All this cocaine, as you say, the heroin, the fentanyl, et cetera. And the cost to this country, the cost of our heroin addiction and misuse disorders alone would pay for the wall and the border security many times over.
And there's no price on saving all of the lives and the devastation to our, particularly our young people.
Security. This is very simple, and it has an economic component, it has a safety component.
So the president is going to move ahead with this come hell or high water.
The president said last week, and he has not changed, that he is going to get this money one way or the other. And remember that the $1.6 billion from the Senate already from the summer, that's a great start. And the president has said that he will get this one way or the other, that he's going to make good on a promise, not because it was a campaign promise, because his first and solemn duty is to keep all of us safe.
Well, we remember why it was a campaign promise, because he wants to make America safe again, as I recall the motto from this president. Kellyanne Conway, always great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lou. Take care.
Kellyanne. a terrific help to the president. Up next, Robert Mueller's witch hunt indicting 2 people close to Michael Flynn just one day before he's to be sentenced. What's going on? To find out, the Heritage Foundation's Hans von Spakovsky and former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell join me right after the break with much more. Stay with us. Joining us tonight, Heritage Foundation Senior Legal Fellow Hans von Spakovsky. Great to have you with us, Hans. And former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell. Sidney, good to have you with us. Let me start with Flynn. Is it your opinion, Sidney, and I'm going to ask each of you to answer this, was this a setup, and is there the basis here in your judgment for this to just be thrown out because of the misconduct of the FBI? Sidney, your thoughts?
Yes, it was clearly a setup from the beginning. Mr. Comey has admitted as much on television, national television recently. And given Mr. Mueller's hiding the ball with evidence that should have been disclosed to General Flynn from the beginning, there's every reason to throw it out. He has apparently disclosed the original 302, according to information that just came out a few minutes ago, pursuant to Judge Sullivan's order this week. But we're still missing the notes of Agent Pienka from the original interview of General Flynn. We're still missing and the Defense Intelligence Agency information and other information on top of that.
We're going to find out whether the judge is satisfied, because that isn't what his order demanded. Hans, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Sidney. It's important for everybody to understand and remember that there was no reason for the FBI to be interviewing Michael Flynn about the conversations he'd had with the Russian ambassador. Why? Because there was nothing illegal about those. In fact, it's very normal for an incoming national security advisor for a new administration to be talking to foreign diplomats from all over the world as they get ready to take over the foreign policy. So there was no reason.
There was no crime. There was no suspicion of a crime in point of fact.
Exactly right. So there was no reason for the FBI to be interviewing him about this conversation to begin with. So why are they there?
And why is he being sentenced tomorrow when it is abjectly clear to everyone that this man was set up, he was railroaded, and the only crime is lying to the FBI? He wouldn't have been taught. And by the way, the FBI agents who interviewed him, as you both know, said he, in their judgment, wasn't lying. This was a setup of the worst kind. But as Jim Kallstrom said here tonight, you know, the great crime in all of this, the great scandal, is the fact that the FBI set all of these people up as part of the Obama administration's unmasking through its national security apparatus and its intelligence agencies, including the FBI, National Security, the CIA, the DNI, James Clapper. What do you think, Sidney?
I think it goes back to 2012, Lou. What we really need disclosed is the FISA court decision and to know who the private contractors are that Mr. Comey gave unlimited access to the raw FISA intel to. I think one of them was Fusion GPS. The other might have been CrowdStrike. They were accessing the NSA database probably for private profit. It's going to be the scandal of the century. We need to know who those people are.
We do need to know, but to me, the real scandal is that the President of the United States, Hans, made that unmasking possible if he did not directly order it to his intelligence agency heads.
Oh, look, I agree. I think that's what everyone is overlooking. The worst corruption, the worst abuse here was the unmasking. Why? Because that was using our intelligence capabilities for partisan political purposes. That has never happened in our history, and it's corruption of the worst kind.
What do you expect to happen tomorrow at General Flynn's scheduled sentencing? You first, Sidney.
I am very hopeful that Judge Sullivan is going to throw the entire prosecution of General Flynn out for egregious prosecutorial misconduct.
Hans, you get the final forecast here.
Well, I hope that happens. I don't have confidence it will, but I hope for Michael Flynn's case it does happen. If not, I think the president seriously needs to consider a pardon for him.
Hans, thanks so much for being with us. Sydney, thank you both. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
As always. Thank you. Up next, we're days away from a government shutdown unless Congress delivers what the president has demanded to secure this nation's borders and the safety of our citizens. We'll have more on the do-nothing Congress when we continue. Stay with us. We're coming right back.